What is up, guys? And welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me is my great co-host, Ralph Hanna, as it's only two of us tonight, guys. It's only two of us. Unfortunately, both Maria and Fede will not be able to join us tonight, but that doesn't mean that we cannot talk about everything going on in the world of football. Obviously, as we gear up to the big draw that's going on in the World Cup, that it's beginning in Qatar. Almost 32 teams getting ready to find out their fates for the World Cup. I mean, obviously, our native national teams in England and the United States will be participating, but unfortunately, Paraguay will not, as they finished up qualification just a couple of days ago against Peru. We'll talk about how they did in their last game against Lima. In Lima, we'll also talk about what's going on in the league as the league is back. We got some league action, and of course, the Copa Libertadores starts in the group stage. We'll see what the Paraguayan teams will be doing. Obviously, a big matchup to start off the Copa Libertadores for the Paraguayan sides with the Super Clásico. So it's going to be shaping up to a really exciting April, Ralph, as I introduce you here. But surprised you're not as nervous as you are for the World Cup draw. I'm curious to see who England and the United States could get. Hell, it might be both of us taking on each other in Doha in November.
Yeah, you never know. Like a repeat of 2010. I was there in Rustenburg in South Africa. Very kind of remote place. I remember like having to get on the back of a pickup truck to get to that stadium because there are no buses. But yeah, we could see. Well, that was a 1-1. I remember that evening, so it could happen again. But a shame Paraguay aren't there. We knew that before even this round of qualifying games, right? Because they were already knocked out before that happened, and we were hoping for a little bit of fight in these last two games. We kind of got it against Ecuador, but not against Peru, as I don't know, maybe slipped back into those bad habits we saw for so much of the qualifying period. I mean, I guess in a way our attention turns to the women's team, because the women's team have a chance of qualifying for the World Cup. They have to play the Copa America around June, July. But the way it works in the women's game is the Copa America will serve as the World Cup qualifiers. And they're warming up next week with a couple of friendlies in Ecuador. They've called up all the big players at the moment. There was a time when Paraguay couldn't always bring the big players from Europe over, but now everybody's in there. So you have like Lisa Chamorro, you have Dulce Quintana, who are playing in Spain, Jessica Martinez, who scored a great goal at the weekend for Sevilla, Fanny Gauto from Brazil, who also scored a really good goal. People should look that up on YouTube or wherever, because she hits a great goal for Ferroviaria and has started really well there in her new club. So there's some promise there with the women's team, and they've never been to a World Cup before. So maybe they can do what the men can't do at the moment, which is get to the big stage, and then we could all be anxious for the draw tomorrow, as we'd like to be, but we're just kind of waiting on our own teams right now.
Yeah, I guess you can really give some. If there's one national team that has to give some sort of joy, let's see if the women's team can do that for these next few games. Obviously, they'll be taking on Ecuador, like you had mentioned, before the start of the Copa America Femenina in Colombia in July. So we'll keep keeping our eyes on that. But let's switch gears, obviously, to what happened in Lima 2 days ago, the last game of World Cup qualifying for all of South America. Well, there's still the Brazil-Argentina game needs to be played, but that's a different story to talk about. But in any case, Paraguay did finish out qualifying in the games that they typically start qualifying. Actually, historically they've always began World Cup qualifying in Lima. They came into this match obviously fresh out of their 3-1 win over a already qualified Ecuador. Obviously, history wanted to be broken for this Paraguay side, as they have never beaten Peru in Lima in a World Cup qualifier, and perhaps give a hand to both Colombia and Chile, who also were fighting for spots in the World Cup. But unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be for history, as history continues for Peru as they finish off in a 2-0 win, goals from Lapadula and Yotun to give off basically a second straight playoff qualification spot for Peru. I have to mention that 2018, they played that playoff against New Zealand to get into Russia 2018. They won that, obviously. And now their fate is going to be either against Australia or the United Arab Emirates. I mean, Ralph, obviously we saw the game. We saw this as obviously an opportunity for Guillermo Barros Schelotto to really test out some young players. I mean, we kind of did see that in the starting lineup. We saw Julio Enciso back in that side. We saw Sebastian Ferreira as well, a player that many people were really excited about. In the back line, you saw the return of Junior Alonso, Omar Alderete, who's been doing so well at Valencia so far, and some of the same players that we saw in the game against Ecuador, but it went completely the opposite of what we saw over there in Ciudad del Este. I mean, I would credit more of two defensive errors really on both the goals. I think you saw that with Lapadula finding the space to beat Alderete, I think, in the first one. And then the second one with Yotun, it's just also another defensive mistake. So, I mean, real quick, I guess first impressions from this, and it's the same old for Paraguay at the moment, finishing off qualification, 18 games, 3 wins, 7 draws, 8 losses, 12 goals for and 26 against. I mean, yeah, it was a pitiful record, but I mean, I think if any game was to really characterize the entire qualification process, it was what we saw in Lima 48 hours ago.
Yeah, because we mentioned the defensive errors, but Paraguay only had 1 shot on target in the whole game, and they hit the woodwork, Sebastian Ferreira on the break, but that was it. That's all they did attacking wise, because those 12 goals scored that you mentioned is kind of where we suffered with so much, because Paraguay weren't offering much threat. Then they always seem to be on the back foot, and well, they were on the back foot straight away in Lima. It took Lapadula like 5 minutes to open the scoring. Of course, Peru were up for it. It was a sellout crowd. They really needed to win to not have any nerves, because they knew kind of Colombia and even Chile were breathing down their necks. So they were very motivated for the game. But it was a shame to see that Paraguay kind of capitulated so quickly, because within that, they have that. There is the Sebastian Ferreira chance. I mentioned he hits the bar. I think that comes when it's still 1-0. But otherwise, I mean, we were just on the back foot the whole time. Christian Cueva had a great game in midfield for Peru. Yotun, who scores, Yotun has always been a kind of thorn in Paraguay's side. I can remember him, if we go back to the 4-1 in Asunción, which was the last round of qualifiers, he had a really good game then, if I remember, or maybe it was the Copa America, maybe it was both games. But we've always really struggled with that more dynamic midfield that Peru have compared to us. So it's a particular shame there, because you looked at, we had Ortiz, Cuba, Sanchez, who did so well, we felt, against Ecuador. But maybe that was like an anomaly. Maybe that was a flash in the pan, because they weren't able to replicate that in this game. I don't know, trying to find some positives is hard. I did think Sebastian Ferreira, remember, it's his debut for the senior team. He did seem to offer more than maybe we saw from Dario Lescano, Carlos Gonzalez, who have been used in the qualifiers. I don't know if I put him above Tony Sanabria necessarily on the basis of 1 game, but he was starting to offer a bit more kind of fluidity, flexibility, which is going to work well if we have to build our team around Enciso, which I think is going to have to be the kind of the future plan, right? And that's somebody who likes the ball on the break and needs space. So he needs another striker to be pulling players with him. And then I think we saw another mistake from Barros Schelotto he picked Junior Alonso. Junior Alonso was playing in Russia, very close to the Ukraine border. He had to essentially escape Russia via Turkey, a very long journey back to Paraguay. He was briefly training in Paraguay before he re-signed with Atletico Mineiro. But in all this time, he hasn't really been playing. So he gets thrown into the game. He couldn't play in the first in the first match of this combo because he was suspended. And Barros Schelotto threw him into the game. And he's not even a left back. He's a centre back, or he has played left back, but he's more comfortable centre back. And he was struggling. He was struggling there. And I thought even Ivan Torres, when he came on, who's another player that's hardly played for the Paraguay national team, but has been playing regularly at club level, he was better acquitted to that match. So we saw maybe Barros Schelotto making those kind of mistakes that we saw before, where he was picking players that weren't quite in form, but based on name or based on previous performances, but not current form. So there was something else to pick up on. And yeah, overall it was a really disappointing game. And it kind of sums up what we saw in these whole qualifiers. And Paraguay ended 8 points short of the playoff spot. So you can blame the home draws with Bolivia and Peru at the very beginning of the qualifiers. But even that, if they had won those two games, they still would have fallen short.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we'll go into deep depth about what happened to Paraguay in that one. But again, I mean, I think this was a game that, unfortunately, was a demonstration of, a mismanaged Paraguay side that just wasn't able to find its identity. And we've spoken out throughout all the 18 games that, it's been so inconsistent from them that we don't know what to expect. And yeah, I think obviously that it's hard to take any positives. I think obviously Enciso is someone that you also have to work with up front with Ferreira. I mean, like, I don't know if he's going to be an undisputed starter, but certainly the way that he's been playing in the local league, you think, yeah, I think he's one for the future. But then you start to think about, all right, obviously there were some reports as well that there might be some friendlies that could be played for Paraguay against, I think Arturo Rubin, the famous journalist in Paraguay, was saying that there might be friendlies against Japan, South Korea. I think I overheard Mexico as well. So, Ralph, you mentioned that how there won't be really any competitive football for Paraguay until the Copa America in 2024. But certainly for these friendlies, I mean, what's really at stake here? I mean, they got nothing to lose. I mean, is this the case where you're like, okay, let's really test out these young players, the ones that haven't been given the chance throughout the entire qualifiers, and just keep them there for the entire new process?
Yeah, I think it has to be looking towards the future with this. Maybe cutting loose some of the players that have been tried and tested for at least two qualifying cycles, because they clearly weren't able to meet the requirements. They weren't up for the job. So is it bringing in players that are young, untested in real competition, because maybe they're playing in the local league and this is the chance? So yeah, I hope we get people like South Korea, Japan, Mexico that have actually made the World Cup. And hey, even some European teams would be great, because that's something that South America is lacking a lot. If you look even at Brazil and Argentina, they haven't played much against European teams since the last World Cup. So that's something that we don't even know in South America kind of level, like where everybody is when they're getting to Qatar. So for Paraguay, it would be nice to also put themselves against some European sides. But hopefully we had a long period in Paraguay when I first moved there, like around 2011, 2012, where we could only manage to play CONCACAF teams, but not USA, Mexico necessarily. So we played Guatemala like 3 times, El Salvador, Honduras, and that wasn't very fruitful in terms of a test for Paraguay. They need to be playing these teams and pushing themselves, which we're talking about the women's team earlier. That's exactly what they've done. They've lost some games to really big margins to Japan and USA, but they've gone and tried to put themselves up against the world's best and measure up and learn from those experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's see what Guillermo Schelotto will be able to do for this Paraguay side moving forward, heading into these next few games, as we switch gears now to the domestic league with the international break over for Paraguay for quite some time. We had some big domestic games happening this weekend, Ralph. I mean, obviously the return of the league in what is going to shape up to obviously been already a really entertaining league so far. A reminder to everyone looking at the table so far, we have Libertad still unbeaten, the only unbeaten side in Paraguay at the moment, leading the way with 19 points. Cerro Porteño, despite losing the Super Clásico, are right behind them with 18 points. Olimpia as well with 14. Actually, looking at Resistencia as well, the team that everyone thought would be kind of the surprise has dropped down because of these results for Olimpia, Cerro, and Libertad. They ended up losing as well, and now they're on 12 points. 5th place, we got Sudamérica on 11th. 6th place, Guarani, a really, really bad demonstration of Guarani so far ever since getting eliminated from the Copa Libertadores. In 6th, 7th place, Tacuaru with 7 points. Guarania with 6. 9th place, you got Sportivo Ameriano. 10th, 12 de Octubre. Nacional in 5th place. With 5 points in 11th place. And General Caballero, Juan León Mallorquín with 4 points to their name. So, shaping up to the weekend games, we got Cerro Porteño taking on 12 de Octubre, Resistencia taking on Olimpia, Guarani Libertad, Sol de América, General Caballero, Nacional Sportivo Ameriano, and Guarani Tacuario. I think what really stands out here for both these two sides, I want to go to the Resistencia Olimpia game first, because that's kind of a top clash, Rob. I mean, a win for Resistencia would actually have them leapfrog Olimpia in the standings, whereas Olimpia, depending on what Cerro do in their game against 12 de Octubre, could be a situation where Olimpia could also get close to Cerro Porteño and obviously to Libertad for that top league race.
Yeah, that's right. We got a really action-packed Friday night, which is rare in Paraguayan football, because usually the Friday night game is, to be honest, it's not the main kind of fixture of the weekend. They usually say that they do one on Saturday evening and one on Sunday evening. But because Cerro and Olimpia will play each other in the Libertadores, which we'll talk about later, they both need the game on Friday. So we get both Cerro and Olimpia on a Friday night. And I think the real interesting game, is the Resistencia Olimpia match, because Resistencia managed by Tiburon Torres. He's an ex-Cerro Porteño player, also manager. He won the league with them. He was in that really tight battle between Cerro and Olimpia in 2015. He was managing Cerro. Chiquiase was managing Olimpia at the time, and they went to the final day playoff. So he has kind of a lot of natural rivalry to take on Olimpia, but also this Resistencia team they're the most exciting, I guess, in the league. If you look at goals for and against, they've been involved in the most goals in the league. They've scored 14, conceded 11. And I think 5 of their last 6 games have seen both teams scoring. So you can probably expect some goals to happen when Resistencia are playing. And I would be very surprised if they tried to play defensive. I'm sure they will try and take the game to Olimpia. And then Julio Cesar Cáceres is going to maybe employ his style, which has been a bit more counterattack and direct football to try and oppose that. And I think what we'll see, which is really interesting, and this actually applies for both games, Cerro and Olimpia, is what kind of teams are these managers going to put there? Because with the Libertadores coming up, I'm sure they want to rest a few players. In the case of Olimpia, they have, let me think, like Richard Ortiz, Marcos Gomez, Ivan Torres. They all went to Lima. I don't think he'll want to play them on Friday if he then needs them for Copa Libertadores. They're all starters. So there's kind of a few questions there. So I think we'll see a very interesting game in Defensores del Chaco between Resistencia and Olimpia. And then prior to that, Cerro, they're playing 12 de Octubre. They would be expected to win, I think, based on their form. But similar, they had lots of international call-ups. Even their main striker, Robert Morales, played in Ciudad del Este. He got injured. He's out for the rest of the season. Marcelo Martins has obviously been playing with Bolivia. So I wonder what they will do up front. Surely Alfio Oviedo is going to start, who's actually done quite well. He scored 3 goals in 3 starts, being almost like a second fiddle to the main guys, but he's still managing to produce some goals. But then I don't know if Martin starts, or does he call up someone like Fernando Romero, who's been knocking around the reserves for a while, but is a very talented striker. So we'll see what Cerro try and do in that game against 12 de Octubre. But I would expect them to take the 3 points. Olimpia Resistencia maybe a bit of a tighter game.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking into that, obviously switching gears now to the competitions that are also beginning in South America. I mean, obviously you talk about the continental competitions. Actually, let's start off with the Copa Sudamericana. We got 2 teams obviously participating in that. A big one for Guarani after their game against Libertad. They will be at the Defensores del Chaco taking on Independiente Medellin on the 7th. And then we see General Caballero Juan León Mallorquín taking on Deportivo La Guaira. So tough game, you would say, for the team from Villarrica, but you could also say that maybe the team from Dr. Juan León Mallorquín could indeed take the advantage against La Guaira, although this is Deportivo La Guaira that has always had experience playing in these type of competitions as well.
Yeah, because La Guaira, I think we're in Libertadores last season. Did they play Cerro? Yeah, they played Cerro last season.
They did.
Yeah, and it was kind of it wasn't an easy game, especially the away leg. General Caballero they're an interesting team because they're actually bottom of the league right now, but they did pull off that important win against Sol de America to qualify for this group phase of the Sudamericana, and they do have good material there. You feel like they have, of course, Santiago Salcedo, the all-time top scorer in Paraguayan football, but also has been top scorer in Copa Libertadores with Cerro right back in, I think, 2007, 2008, that kind of time. I mean, they have quality with him, and then they have players like Ezequiel Aranda on the right wing, who's this youngster, maybe was kind of surplus to requirements at Libertad, but that's because Libertad have such a huge conveyor belt of talent. So he's a very interesting player as well. Let's see what they can do in that game. And for Guarani, it's kind of, I think they're just happy to be there. I think I get the feeling that the emotion of the players when they did qualify, you kind of, and they got a really difficult draw. So you kind of think they're going to enjoy it, go out there and let's see if they can pull something off. Traedio Duarte is one of the longest serving managers now, I think, in Primera, along with probably Chiquiase. So let's see if, at least at the same club, right? Because you have people like Garnero, who's been a long time, but over two. Let's see what he sets up, because sometimes he sets up some quite interesting styles with like high pressing or almost like 3-4-3 formations. So we'll see if he comes up with anything that can surprise Independiente Medellin. But I think it's a tough one for them, right? What do you think, Roberto? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, obviously, these are two sides that are happy to be there. Obviously, I think for Juan Leon Marroquin, they kind of feel as if though maybe being at home, they could take advantage of it. And even for Guaireño, they've had experience in the competition as well, but in such a tight group with only one team qualifying, I think it's only the case of being able to get a positive result there and not get blown out. So I think, unfortunately for us, I think it might not be a good showing, but hey, I mean, we've been surprised before. So let's hope that they do indeed impress us. In the Sudamericana. Obviously, switching gears to the Libertadores, we'll talk about the Libertad game first, because they'll be traveling in hostile territory, and I would say that more from a climate perspective as they go on to La Paz to take on the strongest. And Ralph, I think obviously for a game like this, and what Garnero needs to do is, you have obviously the experience of a Cardoso or a Santa Cruz, but you also have the quick, youthful spark plug that is Julio Enciso, who I'd imagine is going to be useful in a game like this. But I think for Libertad's case, any point taken out of Bolivia, and hell, if they can even get the 3 points, that is going to really serve them well, painting a bigger picture for the entire group.
Yeah, because in Libertadores, the trick is to pick up maybe 7 points at home and hopefully about 3 away, and 10 points you qualify. That's usually it. Or if you can take on 9 at home, even better. But there's usually a difficult game in there with a Brazilian side or Argentinian side. So I'm sure their aim is to try and pick up, let's say, 3 points away from home. And this is one of those games that they may not have earmarked. If they can pick up a draw, they'll be very happy. That said, Libertad do have an interesting record in the competition against Bolivian sides. They've never lost, I think, to our Bolivian side in the Libertadores, despite having to go to altitude. They've been to La Paz twice recently, just to play the strongest, 2019 and 2018, 2019. And they've been to Cochabamba, which is also at altitude, I think, to I can't remember the year. I think it's 2020 even. I'm pretty recently they've been at altitude and they've done okay. So they will be, I'm sure, looking to steal the points. What they did last time they played the strongest it was a 1-1 draw in La Paz, but they won 5-1 at home. So you can kind of get an idea of how they were set up differently in those two games. Yeah, like you say, big game for Enciso. I mean, the kid is traveling all over the place. He did it last year, of course. He got experience in Sudamericana, but now with the national team, now with these games, so the games are coming thick and fast. And it was interesting that Barros Schelotto started him in both games and used him throughout the game. He didn't get taken off early, like 60 minutes or anything like that. So he's really getting a workout. And then there's so much quality throughout this Libertad team. You have people like Tito Villalba, Antonio Barreiros come back now from a very serious injury he suffered in, I think, the Copa America, right? If I remember rightly. So he's been out for a while. He's now back. They have Lorenzo Melgarejo. They have Oscar Cardoso, Roque, of course. So, but just thinking Melgarejo and Oscar Cardoso, players that have played in European finals with Europa League, with Benfica. So they have some real pedigree in there. The two big things that have let Libertad down, I think, in the past in these big games is Garnero getting it wrong sometimes and often trying to play too attacking, and Barbosa, the central defender, who's been in high-profile games, he's made these individual errors. Often he likes to come out very far. He likes to try and anticipate the ball, and he's made mistakes doing that. At altitude, let's see how he goes with that, because of course we know the ball moves differently at altitude. It can be harder to judge. So I would have my eye on somebody like Barbosa, and he needs a good game to ensure that Libertad do take that point, which I think that's what they're aiming for, rather than a win.
Absolutely. I think any point taken out from over there in Bolivia is very crucial. So let's see how they can do. And then obviously we switch gears to what's going on at the Defensores del Chaco, probably the biggest game of the round so far, and that is Olimpia taking on Cerro Porteño, hosting Cerro Porteño actually, but not at the Estadio Manuel Pereira. It will be played at the Defensores del Chaco. Obviously, there had also been some sort of debate on prices for the Cerro fans being lowered actually because they were deemed too expensive, even though that only 1,000 or so fans could get to the stadium. But it's a tough game. These teams have never played each other in a Libertadores group stage match in quite some time. I mean, obviously they're in a group that is already tough with the likes of Peñarol and Colón. So these are the type of games where you have to go all out. I mean, yes, it's your classic rival. Anything is expected, but hell, I mean, whoever's on the receiving end, or being able to get the 3 points, that paints a really good picture for them being able to get out of the group.
Such a big game, because we were just talking there about Libertad, about kind of home and away, because La Paz is so different. This, for both teams, it's essentially a home game for both teams. I know in this case, Olimpia pushed the sporting advantage by having as many fans as possible, because they're not restricted. This isn't like a local Super Clásico when they'd actually have to give more away tickets. They've gone with the very minimum. I think it's like 1,700, the total. So they're trying to push a bit of sporting advantage there. But of course, both sides know this stadium perfectly well for years, for decades. The Super Clásico was always played at Defensores del Chaco. So it's not really anything new for Cerro. Cerro come into it, of course, looking for revenge. They got beaten in La Nueva Olla recently in the Clásico, which is the first time they lost to Olimpia there. Olimpia won the Supercopa as well at the end of last season. So I think for Cerro, there must be like some of that feeling of revenge. We spoke about Morales, who's not there, the top scorer. So that's, of course, a big blow for them. But I really think this is a huge challenge and a moment for Chiqui Arce. Because Chiqui Arce is one of the best tacticians out there in Paraguayan football, but he's like the master, let's say, and Julio César Cáceres is the apprentice. He's new to the game. This is his first senior job. But Julio César Cáceres, he's got the better of Chiqui in both games, definitely in the Supercopa. In the more recent Clásico, maybe you can argue that a couple of players didn't play at their best for Cerro. Some for Olimpia played really well. But I think so far he's got his number. So for Chiqui Arce is really analyzing, which is something he's very good at, is analyzing those games that have just happened and thinking, what can I do now to get the advantage over Olimpia? And like you say, in terms of the group itself, it is a really hard group. So there's no kind of presumption that both teams will get through. I think there's every chance Peñarol go through. Colón can take points off everybody. They're maybe the weakest team because of in this group scene because of pedigree. They don't have maybe the history in continental competitions of the other teams, but they can still on their day take points off any of these three. So for Cerro and Olimpia, yeah, it's a really huge game. They can't do what they sometimes have done in the past in the league when they're both kind of too afraid to lose because there's a tight race or something like that. They often play out a draw or a 0-0. There's no way that can happen here because they can't risk it. I think they need both teams will want those 3 points because it's going to be crucial down to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be crucial. I think you even look at Cerro Porteño as a side really more under pressure because obviously they're coming off that loss to Olimpia in the Super Clásico in the league. So I think it's all up in the air really. And of course, I think you would say maybe Cerro is the better team on paper. You kind of see that in the way that they've done so far in the league. And again, I think it's a crucial game for both of these guys. And that, like you said, they shouldn't go out for the draw. They shouldn't. I think they have to go all out in the attack, and because it's crucial in these type of games. Like, don't risk any points lost against either Peñarol or Colón or anything like that. So these are the games where they really need to to really put it into gear. And the fact that it's the first game and then the last game of the groups, that could indeed be a hypothetical scenario for them that could indeed decide their fate or whether to stay in the competition or not. So I don't know, man. I mean, who do you got on this one? Because this is a tight one to call, man.
No, it's a really difficult one to call because Olimpia, like we were saying, have won the two most recent meetings. Cerro, you say, are the better team on paper. Yeah, I think I agree. I wonder who I was trying to think, who would I take from Olimpia and put it in that Cerro team? Well, at the moment, I take Delis Gonzalez because they need a striker. And then maybe would I take like the experience of Antolina Carras? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's a very tight one. I don't know who's gonna. Probably it'll end up being a draw. Neither team wants it to be a draw, but I think it could end up that way.
This is the game
where draw for sure.
Well, I think this is the game then for Marcelo Moreno Martins. I think this is someone that knows how to play in this competition. He's got to step up when it matters the most.
Yeah, that's right. We saw that with Cerro's more recent strikers. I remember Chorin, they really needed him to step up in the Libertadores, and he scored this like last minute winner against Barcelona. Was it Barcelona? I think so. And then you had Nelson Aido that didn't score that many goals in the league, but he got some really key goals in Libertadores games. So this is the moment. This is your big money striker. This is where he was paid for. He's arguably the most high-profile striker in the league since Olimpia signed Emmanuel Adebayor, who was also brought in for the Champions League, for the Copa Libertadores. It didn't go as well for him, of course. He's most remembered for being sent off against Defensa y Justicia. But let's see that if Martins can make that difference, because yeah, I agree with you. This is kind of why he's there for. It's not to score against Guarani and 12 de Octubre, no offense to those teams, is to turn up in these big matches.
100%. So obviously we'll be keeping our eyes on everything that's going on in the Libertadores, in the Sudamericana, and in the league in our next episode of Guarani Vision. So I want to thank everyone else for listening in, for subscribing, for myself, Roberto Rojas, and Ralph Hanna. Thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.